Back with another episode of the Blue Turf. This is Stab Bell from the KC Soccer Journal. With me on the other side of this wonderful Zoom screen is Eric Bergerud from the Comments broadcast team and so much more. How are you today, Mr. Bergerud?
I am doing fine, Thad. What's up in your world?
Did a little traveling, so I missed the last game in person. I was trying to get back in time to at least get there for half, and that didn't work out. You know how that goes. Was making my wife hold the phone with the game on, so turned away from me so I could not see it, but I could listen to you for part of it. And honestly, part of it I turned off and said, "No, don't want to hear it." I came back at the end. So how you doing?
I'm good. It's been a while since we've talked. Things were looking a little better for Comets Nation right before then, but no, I'm good. Looking forward to Tacoma this Friday.
Yeah, that should be very interesting, and we'll talk about the coming weekend here when in a little bit. But the last time we talked, it's been three games, I think, because there was a couple of them really close together, and one more when we just didn't quite get there. But not a positive result in any of those three. How many points did they get? What, two?
Two out of the last three games. And so the overtime loss in St. Louis, shootout loss here against St. Louis, and then an 8-7 loss to Milwaukee. So you go back before, I think many Comets fans would have not necessarily banked on 9 points, but would have thought, okay, we can get at least 8 out of those three. And for different reasons, things haven't been going the way the Comets have wanted, and they've got some work to do. And I think that we're now at a critical juncture where we're going to find out pretty quickly, will this team turn the page, because they hit the halfway point against Tacoma. A lot of teams have a lot of games in hand, and they will soon catch up to Kansas City. And the Comets have been at this point before, and maybe in a little bit we can talk about whether there's parallels between this season and their championship run, or toward the championship run a couple years ago.
All right. So in those three games, do you see a common thread in those games?
Yeah, well, other than the fact that the Comets have seen a lot of St. Louis and Milwaukee, I think both of those teams have been successful in the transition game against Kansas City. And so if you look at how the Comets lost those games, I think it was in the transition game. We saw that most recently with Milwaukee. The Steinwasser brothers on a couple occasions ran the counter really effectively. And I think that it's easy when you look at a score sheet and you see 8 goals. Some fans will point fingers at the goalkeeper. Other fans will point fingers at the defenders. I mean, for me, it's the transition, which is it's more than just one position. It's losing the ball offensively and then getting beat the other way. And that seems to be a problem recently against St. Louis and definitely against Milwaukee.
But I do feel like St. Louis learned how to play them over the first however many games it was, 4 games, I guess. They learned how to play the Comets, and it helped them improve. Milwaukee is a good team. Don't always love them, but they always pretty much have a good team. But they have been a good team, and they came in and they already knew how to play the Comets. I talked to Coach Stokic a little bit today, and I'll play some of the audio later on and different portions of it. But he very much said that it's a little bit coach speak on a lot of this stuff, but we made a mistake. But in every goal we gave up, we made 3 mistakes or 2 or 3 mistakes, and if we'd have not made one of those 2 or 3, those goals would not have been given up. They outshot them in some of these games. They did various things that were right. The amount of goals scored were not bad. It's just the amount of goals given up.
Yeah, and a lot of teams are dealing with injuries. Comets have had some players nicked up, but I mean, you look at Milwaukee, they came into Kansas City without Ian Bennett, without Ricardo Carvalho, without Oscar Flores. And so, I mean, I think that to win a championship, you have to overcome adversity, and every team's going to deal with injuries, scheduling challenges. Everybody has a different version of that. But we saw Kansas City appear to be on the ropes 2 seasons ago, and they turned things around. And
Yep.
so what I'm going to be looking for isn't necessarily on the field, but off the field. We talked about it at length ad nauseum that year, that about Nacho assuming the captaincy from Ramon Palmer and what was happening in the locker room that translated to great results out on the field. That's what it's going to take for this team to play to, I don't want to say to their potential, but to their expectations.
Yeah, don't disagree. And can they turn it around sooner than later so they can keep a good spot in the standings for the playoffs? That is almost always crucial to have at least a top spot so you do well in the playoffs, have a little more rest or a little better, more favorable venues, et cetera, et cetera. Can they do that? Can they make that turnaround? We from the beginning of the year we thought they were a good team. They have plenty of good, talented players, plenty of talented offense. Zach Raggett, Don Francis, Riyad Marquez, whichever one he's going by this year. Lots of other guys who can score and all that. But the defense was one of my worries early coming into it. But at first I thought they were going to do well. And then, again, it's not just on the defenders. It's that transition, like you say, that relies upon forwards, midfielders, defenders, goalies reading all the different bounces and mistakes and all that stuff. How do they fix that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think oversimplifying, there are probably 4 different ways you can give up goals, okay? One is in the standard run of play when people are running, the other team is running their offense against you. The transition game where everybody is pedaling from offense to defense or defense to offense. Power play goals and shorthanded goals, right? Well, there's 5 set pieces.
Yeah.
So Milwaukee, definitely transition goals, definitely set piece goals. And so there's different things that the Comets need to work on. It's too simple to say their defenders are giving up too many goals, because right. If you're set on a wall, that's very different than if you're marking somebody who pivots around you and scores. That's a different defensive issue. And so where they need to focus defensively, in my opinion, minimizing the transition game and set piece defense.
In that transition game, do you maybe not commit as many players into the attack, maybe keep a little more distance back so you have more time to react to that transition?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on the team and the situation. And we've, over the last few years, have seen teams play against Kansas City that way. I can recall UCFC leaving a defender back. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that, right. But that was a strategy to counter Kansas City's transition game. Is great. We'll only attack 4 guys rather than 5, and we'll prevent you from transitioning us. Part of it is when you convert goals, you don't have to worry about the transition game. When you make your passes and don't get intercepted, you don't have to worry about the transition game. So a lot of it is execution, to Coach Stokic's point. When you're doing the things you're supposed to do offensively, you don't find yourself in this transition situation.
Yeah, it's odd, like you're saying about, if you score, I mean, they have scored more goals than anybody else. Yes, they played more games than everybody else, but on average, their goals per game is either first or second. But I don't want to do all the math right now while we're on a pod. So the scoring is pretty decent. But it is that they need to keep the ball out of the back of the net, and they need to not make the mistakes that allow that transition to happen. So maybe it's better shot choices. Maybe it is shading back a little bit further. But Coach Stokic will be I'd say he'd be pulling his hair out figuring this out, but I think that's already far gone conclusion. And yes, there's been people hurt and players that were let go. There's a lot of different factors that came into this. I guess any other common threads from these last three games? I mean, it's two teams that know them really well. One team that's learned against them essentially. Another team that's always played against them very well and has a little bit of heated rivalry also. Do you think
Yeah,
that changes?
um, I think to be fair, just a couple different bounces. Like Kansas City almost tied the game up at the end of regulation against Milwaukee. Had that gone into overtime, who knows? Maybe we'd be having a different conversation than we're having right now. But
Yeah,
it just feels a little bit different than it did a couple seasons ago when they started 7-1 and then they went on a winless streak and then they ended strong and made it to the Ron Newman Cup championship. Keep in mind, different situation on the field, off the field there, but it felt like there was chemistry. It felt like everybody was in the same direction, and this team can get there. It just I don't have that sense yet, and I think that this weekend will be a really good test for them. They have Tacoma home. You might think, oh, Tacoma, they're great at home, but they don't win on the road. Tacoma's been extremely successful here in Kansas City the last several years. You get past that, and then you're back in Milwaukee, and that will be a difficult game, a difficult environment. But you talked earlier on about dropping points, Thad. Now you have to look at every road game as an opportunity to claw back some points.
you do, and I guess we'll transition a little bit into this weekend anyway as we talk. But to me, it's almost a must win at home against Tacoma. And I would say
Can I
must win.
clarify that? 3 points. I mean,
Yeah,
I know that, old school wins and losses,
right.
but in the current scoring system, you get 3 points for a regulation win, 2 for a overtime or shootout win. All these games at home need to be 3 points.
Yeah, and I think the way mentally I think, which sometimes people probably don't think I do that, but mentally the way I think is at home, 3 points is a win. Anything less than 3 points is essentially a loss because you've dropped points. On the road, 2 points or more is a win to me. That's the way mentally I think. Like if I say, oh, they need a win on the road, it's got to be at least the 2 points, right? Now, I know realistically that nobody's going to win or lose every single game, either home or away or whatever, but that's the way I think. So to me, a must win at home means 3 points. I agree with you. I'm totally agreeing with you.
So I talked with Coach Stokic a week ago Thursday. He attended Nick Bassos's proclamation at City Hall for Nick Bassos Day, and I tend to speak a lot on this podcast about must wins and urgency. And he said teams get hot at different times, and he's more concerned about the team getting hot at the end of the season, which was the blueprint that worked for them 2 years ago. We're almost at the midway point, so I guess my question in response is, okay, so when's the end of the season? Is the end of the season the second half? Is it the last 8 games? At some point, there's a juncture for this team.
There is, and I always, when we talk about that year where they started off 7-1 and then lost like all or most of the 8-game middle part and then won most everything in the last third. We got to remember that middle 8 was like going on the road a lot against really tough teams. They were all really tough teams. That first 7 of 8 wins was against teams that were not at the top of the table or did not end up at the top of the table, if I remember correctly. And then the last third was a little bit more even of teams that were not as high because it was like a lot of losses against San Diego, Chihuahua, things like that, if I remember correctly.
But I would say, so some criticism early when Kansas City was in first place is very much there were St. Louis and Utica City games earlier on, and if you were being cynical about it, you could say, oh, Kansas City had an easier quote-unquote schedule at the beginning of the season. Yeah. I think we've seen recently St. Louis is competing against everybody. Right. UCFC won in Baltimore, so I don't know that there's any team that's a slouch this year like there might have been a couple years ago.
Right, and that's actually kind of where the point I was getting to is this year is a little different. There's not a just a guaranteed win. Okay, I mean Utica is 2-3-1 out of 6 games, but they're not a bad team. Yes, if Kansas City goes there to play, I would say that they need to get at least 2 points there. But at the same time, I know that they're not what they were a few years ago. St. Louis is a better team. I do also think every year we say they're going to be a better team, and they aren't. I make a lot of jokes about them, but that's okay. So yeah, there's on one hand I could say, well, yeah, they got all their wins against St. Louis this year until they didn't, which makes me worry. But again, every team is more balanced this year. Every
Yeah,
team's better.
and so there's teams now finally that Kansas City hasn't seen. So there's Tacoma coming up this weekend, then at Milwaukee, but then Empire home and away coming up too. And so yeah, I would think there's been a lot of St. Louis and Milwaukee fatigue. Great, that'll be done. And it's okay. What does this look like against the rest of the league? And again, every team battles with injuries, and I think that what I'm going to be looking for this weekend is there going to be more of a platoon situation, particularly in the midfield, where it seems like there's been, depending on the game, an influx or outflux of midfielders, right? You have a pretty good idea who your targets are going to be. You have a pretty good idea where maybe the off forward's going to be. The defensive core is pretty set now, but there have been a lot of players in and out. We've seen Jacob Garza in and out. We've seen David Stankovic in and out. Ali Alamari played a couple games. Is this going to be the plan for the remainder of the season, or will we start seeing more of a core? I guess we'll have to stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I kind of asked that, and Coach Speak, I love it. Coach talked about how they're treating this weekend because I said something about how the way I phrased the question was, how are you treating this weekend? How are you looking at this weekend? And he said, kind of like the playoffs, because you got to play in the playoffs. You got to play like a Friday and a Sunday, or 2 days apart in a lot of games and stuff like that. Okay, fair. I was more trying to get to like, how are you going to balance the team? But of course, he's not going to go into too much detail on that anyway.
Right. Well, and please keep in mind, Milwaukee plays. So Kansas City hosts Tacoma Friday night. Milwaukee hosts San Diego Sunday night, and then turn around to host the Comets the next day. Great. I mean, for me, it's a little bit more balanced because although Kansas City has to travel to Milwaukee, Milwaukee has to play 2 games in a row with no days off. And so I think that should be an interesting test for both teams on Sunday.
Oh, it should. I don't know how he's going to play it. I try to read tea leaves, and I'm looking at how they're practicing, and I wouldn't want to give away too much anyway. But it looked very much in the scrimmage that I saw, the game that I saw playing today. And I got there not very early, so I got there towards the end. But the game I saw was, I would say, what you would normally consider a starter team and normally a not starter team, and with lots of guys not playing because of being rested, and, minor knocks here and there and stuff like that, and some with more than minor knocks apparently. I do think it'll be interesting to see who's in goal this weekend for both games.
Do you have some intel that I don't know?
Well, because Philip would have started the last game, but he kind of twisted his ankle or did something in pre-game.
So that was interesting because I didn't see it. So you mentioned Nick Vasso. So Nick was being honored on the field, which meant I had to get upstairs to get prep for the broadcast. So I didn't see Philip go down in pregame. And so when Coronado got introduced as goalkeeper, I was like, okay, coach's decision. I didn't realize what had happened. And so he had to come in when Coronado got hurt, but Coronado came back a few minutes right after that.
Yeah, he he said he re-injured his shoulder a little bit, so I don't know what his availability will be. I don't know if
Yeah.
he's ready to start or whatever. But maybe we see Neto on the bench or starting this weekend. We haven't seen him.
Haven't. That's right. Well, it's a challenge rotating goalkeepers. I mean, I think that if you're any team, you want to see consistency behind you. And you think about San Diego when they started the season, they were platooning goalkeepers, and then Chris Toth got hurt. Boris Pardo has been playing terrifically, and you see San Diego making their move up the MASL standings. So they've dealt with a lot of injuries, and I think that they've had to platoon more than they would have liked to. I think the expectation was it was going to be Phillips' year.
Yeah, definitely. Just various injuries. I mean, that's how it works, right? It, you never know, and we've thought maybe some of the other guys would get more playing time at this point too, and they haven't because of various injuries, like Joe, for example. So it will be interesting to see who's in goal and who starts which game. Or there's guys who I think is going to start every single game possible, like Zach. I mean, if he could play 2 games in one night, I think he would do it. So I have no doubt that he would be out there.
What's a little bit of, I guess you could call it inside baseball, but this is an indoor soccer podcast, so let's call it inside soccer. It's been a bit of a challenge for us for the broadcast because we usually try by midweek to identify who are we going to interview for halftime and which players are we going to spotlight. But we found out the hard way the first game that both the halftime interviewee and the spotlight player didn't play that day. And so we've been trying to have a little bit of more sophistication in terms of who we pick for the Comets. But since so many players have been platooning, it's not as obvious as it was in previous years.
Right.
You could just pick anybody and you were pretty much guaranteed that they were going to be out there.
Yeah, you had a pick of like 15 people, and then there's a couple of guys at the end of the roster that, maybe not, right? So speaking of goalies and speaking of players that have not a ton of time, our old friend Danny Waltman has played a couple games so far this season.
Well, and injury. So Luis Burrieta got hurt, and so Waltman had to come in. And the games I've seen, he's looked good. I would anticipate that he'll be on the bench on Friday, but stranger things have happened. I got the Tacoma lineup, but I didn't look at their injury report. But I would expect Burrieta, who's been terrific this year, to be the starter, but we'll see. It's a very different team, though, without Chris Toth in goal, without Nick Pereira out there at target. But this is a team that fights, and they want respect. And this was pretty evident when they hosted and beat San Diego. Players jawing at Boris Pardo, players pushing soccer's players, and this is a scrappy team, and there's no way Kansas City can overlook them.
No, I was just looking at their results this year again while you were talking, and yes, they've won 5 games at home and lost 2 on the road, and the 2 on the road are pretty much blowouts, 10-3 and 8-0, and all their wins at home were 1 or 2 goal games. But you don't want to overlook a team like that, and plus a team that's always played well in Kansas City for some reason. Players change, coaches change, they still seem to always play well in Kansas City, and then the possibility of maybe Waltman getting in there and just playing lights out against a former team. You know what I mean? It's not a pushover.
Who knows? I mean, that it wouldn't. Although I don't expect them to start, it wouldn't surprise me if they did, because they're having to figure out too multiple games and what that looks like. The thing about the Stars is, you were talking about 3 points at home, and how that's so important, right?
Yep.
Yeah, goal differential could matter at the end of the season. If you're tied with another team, you're looking at playoff position. But really, the most important stat is how many points you have, not goals you scored, but
Right.
points, right? If you catch a distinction. And if they continue to win at home, all they have to do is pick up a few points on the road, and they're there in the playoffs. So they're doing what they need to do to get one of those 6 spots.
Honestly, if you win every game at home, you're in the playoffs in this league. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think that's right. And look at
And
Baltimore. Everybody assumed that they were going to win every game at home, and they've lost the last 2. So go
right.
figure.
That really bothers me a lot, them losing at home. All right. So if you were a coach, and knowing that you probably can't start the same guys in each game, do you go with some younger guys against Tacoma and take your veterans to Milwaukee, or vice versa? You want to ensure you want to do everything you can to maximize your points at home and play your veteran guys, and think that you got to make sure you get those 3 points, and then go on the road and hope.
To answer that question, let's just assume we don't know anything about injuries, right? Because injuries compound things. If somebody's nicked up, I think that the coaching and training staff is going to be more hesitant about having them travel on the road. Yeah. So, but if that weren't an issue, I think at this point of the season, you bring your veteran players on the road. So you might recall that last game at St. Louis. You mentioned Joe Wainwright. He got called in. Ali Alamar, he got called in. They brought in a bunch of younger players. It didn't go well. I mean, not to say that was the reason, but no. They lost in overtime there, right? You're going to go into Milwaukee, which is a much more hostile environment than St. Louis is. Me personally, I'd rather have some experienced players who can handle that environment, that situation, that adversity. But we'll see what the call is.
Yeah, I think I would at least play maybe a couple of younger guys in the game against Tacoma, and then try to take the most veteran guys on the road, because that's your only chance. But you just absolutely have to make sure if you can rest guys in the game against Tacoma at any point, you do that. You know, if you start with a Zach Reggett out there, and again, he's a bad example because he's never going to rest. But if you can start a Dom Francis and he gets a couple goals and you're up by 4, maybe you move him to an off shift and you don't play him as much, just to make sure that you could take him to Milwaukee and get the max out of him. And we always talk about our plan of how we're going to talk about these things, and we almost always kind of go astray. But we've kind of talked about the season so far, but let's take a short break and we'll come back and talk about the rest of the season a little bit more, and also our friend Nick. How about that?
Sounds great.
AI is incredible. It can teach you how to fry an egg and even write a poem, pirate style. Yarr! But it knows nothing about your work. Slackbot is different. It doesn't just know the facts. It knows your schedule. It can turn a brainstorm into a brief. And it doesn't need to be taught. Because Slackbot isn't just another AI. It's AI that knows your work as well as you do. Visit slack.com/meet Slackbot to learn more.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
New Year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. So now get 2 snack wraps, plus fries and a medium soft drink for just $8.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
And we're back. All right, so the Comets, I shouldn't say we, I'm trying to be objective. The Comets are almost halfway through the season. They've 11 games in, so they'll hit halfway. When they play Tacoma, go slightly over halfway. When they play Milwaukee, they got to get. We've talked about this already a little bit about how they need to be better, not giving up transitions and all that stuff, health and all that stuff. Do they have everything they need? Which, again, not knowing injury status on some players at this point or anything like that, but do you feel they have the players, they have the ability, they have everything they need to be able to get that chemistry, get the transition game straightened out a little bit, and knock out solid points and finish at least above mid-table?
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, you go back to the beginning of the season, you and I talked that we were there at the world-famous Kansas City Soccer Dome looking at the guys. They look like a team that could compete for the championship. At the time, everybody thought San Diego was the odds-on favorite, but Kansas City would be there. I don't know that much has changed. I mean, we could talk a little bit about, from a roster perspective, the departure of Mijatovic, how has that impacted the team? That's really the main variable that I can see at this point. But I still contend it's probably more team chemistry than it is there a player out there or a trade that will somehow magically make things better? I'm not sure I see that. I think it's more the former, that if everybody's playing for each other, minimize the mistakes, etc. I don't know that this team needs to panic.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting they're ready to panic or anything. Just trying to see if you feel like they have what it takes. And again, having what it takes doesn't mean you will do it, obviously, because everybody is competing against you. Not everything always turns out the way you hope it does. But they do have the talent, especially attacking, especially midfield. I do sometimes wonder if the defense needs a little solidifying, but I don't think Mijatovic was actually playing that well as defender most of the time.
Well, and where I think they're missing him is more on set pieces and special teams, because he was among the league leaders in assists. He was scoring goals on special teams. And so that to me is more of the challenge there. I mean, if we're going to go on not the way back machine, but sort of the way back machine, this team has had to evolve ever since John Sosa left. And I'm not talking about John Sosa leaving defensively, but John Sosa leaving on the power play and on set pieces. And so they've tried different versions, Nacho, Lucas Souza, Mijatovic, in terms of who's going to be the person on top of the ball making things happen. And it just hasn't been as consistent as it was several years ago. You contrast that with Milwaukee, with Mario Alvarez. That is a unit that's humming right now. Their special teams, their set pieces.
If it's up to you, again, putting you in the coach spot, who would you set up to take the kick on a set piece?
No, I think I think it is Nacho, and you can see them. They scored last game. They've been, the last couple of games, actually, I think they've been more effective on this. It's just it's been a slow progression to get here, whereas a few seasons back, it seemed like they scored a lot of goals on set pieces, a lot. And so I think they're figuring it out. I mean, there have been adjustments. I talk about it on the broadcast all the time. They'll slide three left-footed players to the right to give Nacho some options. You've got Tetsane, Reget, and Francis, and all of them have cannon shots. So I think that they've made some adjustments there. Things are starting to click there, which is good. But the margin of error, I think, is a little bit different. And I'd say the other thing in terms of contrasting where you and I were headspace-wise at the beginning of the season versus now, you had returning, at least we thought, all-star goalkeeper with Nicola Neto. Haven't seen him yet. You had a first-team all-star or first-team all-league goalie in Philip Ejimadu that we assumed would be getting the bulk of the work, and he's had to battle through injuries.
Yep.
No shade, no disrespect to Julio Coronado, but you start the season, think we have option 1 and 1A with a lot of experience, a lot of presence out there, and it's put Julio in tough situations relatively early in his pro career.
Right. You don't like to. Again, he's a good keeper, and I think he can have a long career in this league if he wants to. But you don't want to put the guy in that kind of spot when you don't want that rookie, second year really, keeper playing more than a couple games or getting some time in games when you're well up or well down type of thing. But he's done fairly well when he's been out there. It's just the team hasn't always been good in front of him at the same time. So it seems like a great guy. So I wish him well.
Yeah. And so, but as I said earlier, every team has to battle through injuries. So
right.
you figure out how to adjust, and you may know more than I do in terms of who's playing goal this weekend, but Comets will need to adjust. They have their lineup this past weekend. You had 2 goalies in there who were not at 100%.
Yeah, and no, I do not know who's going to be playing this weekend because I honestly, no keepers were out there when I was there. None of the normal keepers.
We're going to go sit. Yeah, watch. Comets are going to go 6 attacker the whole game. It'll be like we'll show Milwaukee on Sunday. We'll give them some of their own medicine, and we'll just play 6 attacker and see what happens.
It would be entertaining. What was that game? Brian Harris played like 6 attacker the entire game. It was down in Texas, wasn't it? Or
that's some years ago.
Yeah. It was like an outdoor indoor soccer game.
Was that at Sonora? Well, I don't know.
It was one of those. Yeah, I don't remember, but I think that no keepers made the trip, or one keeper, and he was hurt, and he just played the entire game or most of the game, at least at 6 attacker. They won that game.
Funny story about this, and I didn't get a chance to say it on air, so everybody was giving Nick Vassos well wishes. So Jimmy Schwab came by the booth on Sunday and was chatting with Nick, and I don't know if you remember this, but this would have been the Comets, I want to say 90, it was either 89-90 or 90-91 season. Mike Dowler is hurt. At that point in the M, it was Major Soccer League. They'd gotten rid of the I. Kansas City's playing San Diego. You did not have to dress 2 goalkeepers, so they only dressed Jim Gorsuch, and Jim Gorsuch got taken out by Branko Segota like in the first quarter. Segota gets red carded, and Jim Schwab had to play 6th attacker the whole rest of the game. It didn't. He saved the shootout, but they obviously lost that one. It's not ideal to have a field player in there for a long stretch of time, but it's happened a couple times in Comets history.
By the way, I scored on Gorsuch in a arena in St. Louis once.
Hey, no video. It didn't happen.
No, true. And he was doing I don't even know what he was doing there because he wasn't the St. Louis keeper at the time, I don't think.
He played after, if this was after the original Comets left, he signed that last season with the St. Louis Storm. So he was in goal.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't.
Yeah.
No, he was like doing a camp with like kids and stuff, and the ball came out to me, and he looked at me like, "Go ahead, take a shot," and I scored.
Yeah.
Him, so.
Wow.
No, he was a really nice guy.
Yeah,
at least
great goal
when I talked to him. All right, speaking of Nick Vassos, man, that's one of the things I really bummed about that I missed this last game because I wanted to be there and get some shots of him being recognized and all that stuff, and would have been fun to watch him running up and down the stairs from what I've heard. But just
that was funny.
I don't want to say like what do you have? What can you say about a guy like Nick? I mean, he's always enthused. He's always there. He's just every time I've ever dealt with Nick, he's always been such a good guy.
Yeah, I think all that is true and more. And he's taught me a lot over the 6+ seasons. We're in our 7th season together, so I have the utmost respect for him. We've been talking a lot in the last couple of years about all-time Kansas City indoor soccer history, and we're seeing on the current team Ramon Palmer and Nacho head up the all-time charts. It's really easy to romanticize the original Comets, and Gino Schiraldi's still the all-time player in terms of games. But if you think about how many games Nick Bassos has called in the early part of his career, when he was doing Comets radio, he was calling home and road. So he was doing 40-game seasons. I haven't tracked it, but I'm sure somebody with time on their hands could, or at least estimate it. It would be really interesting to put Nick up against someone like Gino Schiraldi, Wes Wade, in terms of games, their games played, but his games announced. That's his stature and that's his impact on indoor soccer here in Kansas City. He is in the elite echelon of people who have been connected to indoor soccer in terms of the number of games they've been engaged in. So if just for that, he doesn't have a jersey to retire, but he deserves what he received last week and more.
Yeah, maybe they could like seal one of his jackets or a tie and put that up in the ceiling in the rafters as a retirement for him. What do you think?
That would be good, or like a cookie jar that would just be permanently placed there.
You know, I want to invite him on to a pod just to let him tell me stories about indoor soccer and what he's went through and the progression that he's seen and all that good stuff. I don't know how much time he'll ever have. Because I'll tell a little story. I was doing stuff at my daughter's high school and and stuff like that, and they knew that I did a lot of stuff around sporting and different things. They're like, "Hey, could you get a sporting player to come do some special judging thing?" And I'm like, "No, they're not going to come for me." But I said, "You know what? I know somebody who might be nice enough to do this." And I said, "Nick Vassos." And they go, "You know Nick Vassos?" They didn't care that I knew Matt Beasler, right? They were just like, "Oh, we want some athlete." But I said, "Yeah, I could ask Nick." They're like, "You know Nick Vassos?" He was the celebrity in their minds. And the thing is, I messaged him and he's like, "Oh, tell me when, tell me where. I'd love to do it." And he came and he was, celebrity judge for something. It was something stupid like high schools always do. But he was, again, such a nice guy and such a, he came in and did it, was a good sport about everything. And that's just the kind of guy he is.
Yeah. And I think that players past and present clearly respect him. Having had an opportunity to call a neutral game with him a few times, we were able to call some neutral games during the COVID playoffs when the semis were held in Kansas City. And then we did a game in St. Louis on this was the Harrisburg Heat and St. Louis Ambush. As an aside, this is the game that Mike De Silva punched out Kevin Ellis. So we had some stories to share about that. But
as people are wont to do, yeah.
His prep and his enthusiasm is genuine regardless of who's playing. And I think as a viewer, if you watch a Nick Vassos game, you're going to be entertained regardless of which teams are playing.
Yeah. You talk about the number of games he's called and all that. That would be an interesting number, and I'm going to see if Mike Kuhn or maybe Brian, the Professor Holland, can figure that stuff out. I'm not going to dig into stats like that. But the thing I would really like to ask Nick is, how many times do you think he said "top shelf where Grandma keeps the cookies"?
A lot. And what's funny is you hear other broadcasters in the league do top shelf, but it'll either be like Christian Filliman was like, where my Uncle Fritz keeps the schnapps or something.
Yeah,
I see that as respect, right? That's respect for Nick Vassos, and that one he's absolutely said a lot. But you could just average just in the most recent Comets iteration. The first 15 seasons, and except for the COVID year, 12 home games. That's what 180 games, and then you add all his attack / Comets 2 games on top of it.
Yeah.
He's seen a lot. He's called a lot, and he transcends the generations, and that's what makes him special. There are a few people who have transcended generations. Gino Schiraldi to a certain extent, because he played both for the Comets and the Attack, and then he called some games afterwards. Alan Mayer for sure, because you go back to when he came to Kansas City in 1985 and his evolution as a player, coach, and whatever. But Nick's longevity is something special.
Oh, definitely is. I wonder if he'd be willing, and probably not because he wouldn't want to insult somebody, but if he'd be willing to put together his all-time Comets, first and second lines or something like that.
That'd be an interesting conversation. You ought to ask him that, because he might absolutely have some thoughts. He might also have some thoughts if you were to have him put against the all-time opponents, because that was in a way is an easier one, because you're not going to hurt anybody's feelings that you care about. But
right.
You think of just about every position. Yeah, he's called Hector Marinero, Zoran Karic, Ian Bennett. He's called Victor Nogueira. He's called Boris Pardo. He's called Chris Toth, and everybody in between. Goran Hunyak, both ways, Kansas City and against Kansas City, right? So he's seen a lot.
Yeah. So. We've talked Comets, we've talked the schedule, we've said that what kind of points they need this weekend, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just finish this on a high. Nick, we appreciate you. You're one of the best, I think the best play-by-play guy in the league, and for years. So I appreciate you, Nick, and all that. You got anything else to add to that, Eric?
Well, other than one of the great memories after I'm done announcing that I'll reflect on was this past Thursday when the Kansas City Council proclaimed Nick Vassos Day. And it's not, sure, they've done days before, but to see all the people who came out, friends and family, the coaching staff, it showed how loved he is. He's not just respected, he's loved, and that's special and unique.
Totally agree. We're going to wrap up this portion of the podcast. Stay tuned. There'll probably be 3 or 4 minutes of me interviewing Coach after practice this morning. And other than that, I think we are out. How do you look at these last 3 games where you did not get the results that you were desiring?
The main thing that I take out of the, especially the last 3 games, even when we started at the beginning of the season, we're giving away goals that we shouldn't give, and that we need to focus on those moments. We had a video session this morning, and we went over those moments. I felt like there's been a little bit of disconnect as well in the back of the staff from our defenders. Midfielders not following their guys, getting beat inside, being disciplined enough to follow their guys. So, there's a little bit of everything. But when you look at the clips, it's like it's not one per se mistake. It's like there's like 3 that lead up to the goal, right? So, the one thing is that we have to, once we make a mistake, we have to be quick to adjust it and fix it. I think that's where we're lacking right now at the moment.
Kind of a similar question in a way, but it's almost the midpoint of the season. It will be this weekend for you for number of games played. How do you assess this first half of the season?
There's a lot that we need to work on. It's not where we want to be, to be honest. But again, you look at the games that we've lost. We have either lost in overtime or by 1, so there's little details that we need to adjust and fix. I think the last game that we played, actually a good game, to be honest with you. In transition, we did much better. It was just those moments that we just we're not focused, and especially in an indoor game, the game is so fast you can't turn off for a second. And I felt like in that game we kind of turned off at moments that we shouldn't have. So I think just adjusting those moments will help us. We're not exactly where we want to be, but there's a lot of positives as well too. So I think we just have to balance it out.
2 games this weekend. How do you balance Friday, Sunday game?
We're looking at it as that's going to kind of be our playoffs, right? You play on a Friday, Saturday off, you play Sunday, a second game, right? So I think right now the mindset is, see where we stand with back-to-back this way. I think those first 10 games in 32 days took a toll on us a little bit. not only physically but mentally as well too. So it's just kind of recharging and figuring out what the lineup is, what players are healthy, that are 100%. And again, I don't make excuses, but we just got to find the balance and figure out how that works.
I guess how key is it to go into Milwaukee on Sunday and get a result, just to kind of level some playing field out a little bit? At least?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now is it's very important. I think the next, especially even Tacoma, Tacoma is 5-2 right now. So we need to establish ourselves at home. Giving away 2 overtime losses, and then one game, one goal loss. But I think right now the main thing is just getting back into the defensive mindset, mentality-wise, focus on that. I know that we're going to score goals, but I think right now defensive we have to work on that.
And with we've talked about this a number of times with the league contracting a little bit, players dispersing, teams getting better across the board. Has there been any teams that maybe have surprised you about how they played? Either achieving more than you thought or not achieving as much?
I think, yeah. I don't think anything is a surprise. I think Tacoma is doing. I thought they were going to do a lot better. Just because I know they started preseason 2 months before the season started, so I kind of was expecting to be better, but I think they stepped up even higher in my opinion. I think we get from Empire what we get, so that's nothing new. But I think every team in general for me has increased in a positive way, if that's offensively or defensively. So I think every team, with having 8 teams in the league, it's actually condense the rosters and the quality players, and I think every team right now at this point, as you can see and watch the games, anybody can win, anybody can lose. So.
Do you enjoy that as much as maybe fans might?
Yeah. I mean, I want to play every game, be an intense game. You know what I mean? In the past we were saying, I always want to play against San Diego or Milwaukee or Baltimore. Now every game is one of those games. You know what I mean? So like right now, what makes it more fun is none of that. Maybe you can say our 4 games in a row with St. Louis was a little bit too much, right? It's hard to balance that out. That's why we changed a lot of the roster and players. But I think in general, every game is you can win or you can lose at the same time. So it's a lot harder.
Attention passengers, we've now reached our destination. We hope you enjoyed the flight and have a nice day.